Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one. A Heinkel Ha from the Luftwaffe falling in the English Channel. The aircraft, a symbol of the German Air Force during the World War II, met its end amidst the aerial conflict, reflecting the brutality of the battles that marked the European skies. German soldiers crossing the border into the Soviet Union during Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, the beginning of a brutal invasion that would mark the start of one of the largest confrontations of World War II. Soldiers repairing the hull of the Graf Zeppelin airship while it flies over the Atlantic Ocean in 1934. A testament to the advanced engineering of the time, where the crew faced unexpected challenges. An American soldier watching his former Dachau prisoners prepare to execute an SS guard with a shovel in April 1945. The guard, responsible for torturing and killing men, women, and children, met his end in an act of revenge and despair. Searchlights cutting through the sky over Gibraltar and anti-aircraft guns opening fire during training for an air raid attack in November 1942. A demonstration of preparedness and vigilance, reflecting the constant threat of bombings. An old Russian man in his bed, holding tightly to his old uniform. A symbol of resistance and memory, where the past of struggle and sacrifice blends with the fragility of the present, remembering the scars of a distant war. Gebirgsjäger Helmut Wernsberger with his K-98K equipped with a telescopic sight. With 64 confirmed kills, he was one of Germany's most successful snipers. He served on the Eastern Front with the 3rd Mountain Division until he was wounded. The impression of a Mitsubishi Kamikaze Zero on the side of HMS Sussex in 1945. The brutal impact left a dent in the ship's hull, symbolizing the intensity of Japanese suicide attacks during the final days of the war. Waffen SS flak crew on a hot summer day in Norway, wearing only underwear in 1943. The harsh conditions of war forced even the toughest soldiers to adapt in unlikely ways. A German Panther tank burning during the Battle of Cologne in March 1945. The destruction of one of the Wehrmacht's most feared tanks symbolized the collapse of Nazi military power as Allied forces advanced toward final victory. German soldiers enjoying some beers after the failure of the Allied attack on Dieppe, France, in August 1942. The German victory that day provided a break for the soldiers, who celebrated the defeat of the Allied forces. British infantry advancing through a smokescreen during training in 1941. A test of courage and discipline preparing soldiers for the chaos of war, where limited visibility and strategy became crucial for survival. USMC soldier Theodore J. Miller being helped aboard a ship after intense fighting in the Eniwetok Atoll. Miller was killed in combat a month later, leaving behind the image of an incomprehensible and heroic sacrifice. British soldiers after their release from Japanese captivity in Singapore in 1945. Marked by suffering, but with a new sense of freedom, they returned from the hell of war with physical and emotional scars. An iconic image of the Third Battle of Kharkov aboard a Panzer IV Osviji of the Totenkopf Division in 1943. The scene captures the relentless advance of German forces while facing fierce Soviet resistance. An American Marine attached a lucky horseshoe to his helmet, and it truly proved lucky, blocking a Japanese bullet and saving his life in Okinawa in 1945. A symbol of faith and destiny, where luck intervened amidst the deadly chaos of battle. Operation Dynamo, the evacuation of the BEF in Dunkirk, begins. More than 330,000 soldiers managed to reach the United Kingdom, a feat of resistance in the face of imminent defeat, ensuring the survival of a vital force. Private George A. Guckenberger of the 101st Airborne Division in his trench during the siege of Bastogne. This photograph was his last, as he was killed in action in January 1945 at the age of 22. A Japanese bomb hits the flight deck of the USS Enterprise, costing the life of the photographer who captured this image in August 1942. a tragic sacrifice where the fury of the Pacific conflict was captured at a high cost. Captured German rifles in Stavanger, Norway, after Germany's surrender in 1945. Allied victory is reflected in the weapons taken, symbolizing the end of Nazi resistance and the beginning of a new chapter for Europe. The photographer captured a great shot minutes before the most famous image was taken on Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima, in 1945. A moment captured at a critical point in the battle, just before becoming an icon of courage. A Russian refugee who saved an American soldier from a burning tank, receiving an American uniform to fight alongside the 3rd Tank Battalion of the 10th Armored Division in March 1945. British and Irish troops landing on the beaches in 1944. A decisive act of World War II, where the courage and sacrifice of thousands of soldiers marked the beginning of the liberation of Nazi-occupied Europe. A crew member of the German tank destroyer marks each victory with white paint on the barrel of his tank. Each mark symbolizes an enemy tank destroyed in the relentless clash between the Axis forces and the Soviet Union. With its 33-meter barrel and a weight over 300 tons, the K-12 was fired from occupied France toward the English Channel. An impressive war machine capable of causing massive destruction, symbolizing the Nazi military power. Soldiers of the British Royal Signals mocking Adolf Hitler's gestures in October 1939. A scene of contempt and resistance where humor and irony became psychological weapons against the Nazi regime shortly after the war's start. On D-Day, American soldier John Marvin Steele was the paratrooper who fell atop the church tower in St. Mary-Glise. His fall became a symbol of the uncertain fate faced by soldiers during the Normandy invasion. A midnight possession of SS troops at the Feldherrnhalle in Munich, 1938. An oath-taking ritual symbolizing the strengthening of the SS's power, with Munich as the backdrop for another act of submission to the Führer. An elderly Russian World War II veteran finally found the old tank he fought in throughout the war. Now, the tank stands in a small Russian town, raised as a monument to history and the bravery of an unforgettable past. A Russian survivor, liberated by the U.S. Army, identifies a former Nazi SS officer who brutally beat prisoners, seeking late justice and revenge for the horrors experienced in the concentration camps. One of the last photos taken of Adolf Hitler, made a month before his death on March 20th, 1945. A grim portrait of a leader whose days of power were coming to an end, while the war neared its final defeat. The Japanese imperial soldier who hid in the Philippine jungle for 30 years after World War II, Hiro Onoda Center, surrendering to the president of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos, left. German soldiers advancing through a Soviet army depot, with tanks still on the delivery trains in Smolensk, 1941. A symbol of the relentless advance of the Wehrmacht during Operation Barbarossa, where Soviet resources were quickly looted. British soldiers wearing gas masks while peeling onions in Tobruk in October 1941. An everyday scene amidst the conflict, where even the simplest tasks became challenging. A German soldier taking a break during combat, amidst fatigue and reflection, during the Battle of Berlin, as the Reichstag appears destroyed in the background in April 1945. German troops armed with Sturmgewehr 44 assault rifles defending the Pripyat River line against a Soviet attack. A fierce battle on the Eastern Front, where the technical superiority of the German rifles was challenged by the advancing Soviet troops. Soviet soldiers with a cat they found inside a building in ruins in Stalingrad, 1942. A small moment of tenderness and humanity amidst the horror of battle, where even animals became victims. A Frenchman offers a glass of wine to an American machine gunner in Coutances, France, in July 1944. A gesture of hospitality amidst the war, symbolizing unity between the Allies in a Europe ravaged by conflict. A German soldier returns to his wife after being a prisoner of war in Germany in 1945. a reunion marked by emotion and relief after the horrors of the conflict, bringing the promise of reconstruction and the hope for a new beginning. Luftwaffe Asses meet with Hitler after an award ceremony at Berghof in 1944, a prestigious occasion where the elite pilots of the Nazi regime were celebrated for their aerial victories. A rare photo of the crews of German Heinkel bombers at Tatsinskaya Airport performing a symbolic funeral before their next mission in 1942. The inscription on the coffin read, "Your life, your reward." American soldiers walking past an elderly woman, observing, unable to believe the destruction that the war brought. Her startled gaze reflects the suffering of a generation marked by devastation as the conflict destroyed homes. Adolf Hitler being requested to make a donation by Boys of the Hitler Youth in 1939, a representation of Nazi propaganda seeking to involve younger generations in the war effort, consolidating the regime's ideology from childhood. The photo was taken by Walter Frentz when Adolf Hitler was informed that France would surrender on June 17, 1940. A decisive moment in the war, capturing the reaction of a leader witnessing the fall of one of the greatest European powers. A German Kriegsmarine soldier posing next to a destroyed Churchill tank while holding a captured Legitimus Collins Canadian machete after the failed Allied attack on Dieppe, France in 1942. A Wehrmacht soldier lighting his cigarette with the flame from a flamethrower. A curious gesture amidst the violence of war, where the need for a simple moment of normality blends with the brutality of weapons on a battlefield. Two German soldiers in action during the Battle of Berlin, one armed with a STG-44 assault rifle in April 1945. A portrait of the Nazi army's final struggle, trying to resist the imminent collapse of their regime in the German capital. German soldiers during a break at the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin. A remarkable contrast where the sporting spirit and the propaganda of the Nazi regime intertwined, reflecting the use of the event to showcase the regime's control. A weary and exhausted American Marine crying among the ruins after the tough battle for Hill 200 near Peleliu Airport in August 1944. The scene reveals the high cost of war, where pain was constant. An SS patrol in North Africa on January 18, 1943. An elite group facing the scorching heat and vastness of the desert on clandestine and dangerous missions, marking the resistance and audacity of British soldiers. The shooter Hector Murdoch being greeted by his beloved wife Rosina and his son John. Captured by Japanese forces, Hector spent more than 3 years in a prison camp in Singapore, where he nearly died of cholera. Two members of the original Filthy 13, U.S. paratroopers from the Airborne Division, who became the first Pathfinders. The photo was taken around D-Day, symbolizing the audacity of these elite troops who paved the way for the Normandy invasion. German tank destroyers martyr the 3H in Tunisia, ready to be sent to the front lines, loaded with gasoline drums. A meticulous preparation to face the tough battles in North Africa. A dog sitting in the snow, with a column of Italian troops retreating from Stalingrad in December 1942 in the background, clearly illustrating the desolation and chaos of defeat. American troops operate a machine gun in a captured German position during the Battle of the Hurtgen Forest in 1944, an example of fierce resistance in difficult terrain where each position conquered represented a crucial step toward victory. Hitler needed to eat only one bowl during his meal with Goebbels for the propaganda of a winter relief campaign in Berlin, 1934. A staged moment reflecting the tactics of the Nazi regime to reinforce the image of solidarity. A Mercedes-Benz showroom with a large portrait of Hitler in Munich, 1935. The image reflects the close relationship between major German companies and the Nazi regime, where propaganda and the cult of Hitler's personality were prominent. A German saboteur captured while wearing a U.S. Army uniform during the Battle of the Bulge is tied to a post moments before his execution by a firing squad in Belgium. American soldiers guarding the coast with an M1919 machine gun from a trench in Astoria, Oregon in October 1942. a defensive posture in the face of the growing threat of war, reflecting the constant vigilance on the U.S. West Coast. This photo, taken a few days after the death of George S. Patton in December 1945, shows his faithful dog, Willie, lying next to the general's personal belongings. A silent gesture of loyalty and sadness. Adolf Hitler and his dog Blondie in 1942. The rare and personal image shows the more intimate side of the Nazi leader who, despite his imposing figure and brutality, maintained a bond with his pet. While everyday life continued, a football game between Charlton Athletic and Arsenal was happening in Britain, with a home guard sentry watching for potential German air raids. A staged photo of German troops disembarking from a tracked armored vehicle. The image was used as propaganda to showcase the effectiveness of the transport design, highlighting the mobility and power of the Wehrmacht. An American soldier of the 87th Infantry Division stepping on a portrait of Hitler in Koblenz, Germany, in March 1945. A symbolic act of victory where Nazi oppression was defeated and Allied soldiers marked the end of a brutal regime. A procession of the Royal Air Force accompanying the graves of two Luftwaffe pilots, August Schleicher and Kurt Seidel, from St. Philip's Church to Portobello Cemetery in Edinburgh, Scotland, in October 1939. This photograph offers a unique view angle of one of Hitler's speeches in Frankfurt on March 16, 1936. The event was a milestone in Nazi propaganda, with the leader attempting to consolidate his power before a fervent crowd. American and Soviet soldiers together at the end of the war. A symbol of Allied victory where, despite ideological differences, the joint fight against Nazism united forces from two powers to seal the end of the global conflict. German soldiers leading Jewish civilians out of the Warsaw Ghetto during the uprising in April 1944. A marked act amidst a desperate resistance where the struggle for survival mixed with the brutality of an unyielding occupation. A German military cemetery in North Africa. A silent place where fallen soldiers rest, far from home, during the Africa campaign, which was marked by sacrifices and intertwined fates amid the heat and sand. An inscription on the gravestone of a British soldier who died on June 6, 1944, at the age of 17. A young life tragically interrupted by the war, leaving an eternal void and memories of a sacrifice made for freedom. German soldiers react to footage of the concentration camps in 1945. A moment of shock and denial, where the reality of the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime was finally revealed, challenging the very conscience of those involved. Reichserntedankfest rally with great participation in Buchenberg, 1934. A massive display of support for the Nazi regime where propaganda and the cult of Hitler's figure were highlighted. A German soldier converses with a Soviet prisoner of war wearing the SN-42 armor in Karelia in 1944. A scene reflecting the brutality and complexity of the Eastern Front, where combat and capture were relentless. Captain Lewis Nixon of Easy Company, the morning after Victory in Europe Day in 1945. An image of reflection and relief as the horrors of war began to give way to the hope for a peaceful future. A German soldier from the Wehrmacht Medical Corps after surrendering to Allied forces in Ochtrup, Lower Saxony, in April 1945. The imminent defeat of Germany led the last remnants of resistance to surrender. The crew of the B-29 Superfortress Waddy's wagon posing to duplicate the art on the fuselage. All were killed in action when the bomber was shot down over Japan in January 1945, leaving behind a legacy of sacrifice and courage. Holocaust train bound for a concentration camp, liberated by the Allies in early April 1945. The scene symbolizes the freedom that finally came to the prisoners after years of suffering and oppression at the end of Nazi brutality. American troops display a captured Nazi flag and a portrait of Hitler in front of a cafe on Hohenzollernstrasse, Munich, in March 1945, a record of victory over the Nazi regime and humiliation for the invaders. Julius Erasmus, a former German soldier and combat engineer captain who recovered and buried thousands of soldiers of all nationalities in the Hürtgenwald area after the war. American paratroopers in Normandy in June 1944 thought they had captured a Japanese soldier in German uniform, but they were mistaken as the soldier was Korean. His name was Yang Kyung-jong. Adolf Hitler visiting one of the trenches where he served during World War I in northern France, in Fromelles, in the Nord Department, in 1940. A symbolic return to a past of combat before his rise to power. Dutch girls escorting American soldiers to a dance around 1944, an occasion for fraternization amidst the chaos of war, where youth united to celebrate the hope for better days. Soviet soldiers crouching in a trench as a Russian T-34 tank passes over them during the Battle of Kursk in 1943, reflecting the intensity of the battle, where danger was a part of daily life in the largest armored confrontation in history. The German patrol advancing through the sands of El Alamein in 1942. The tension in the African desert increased as Axis and Allied forces prepared for a decisive confrontation. Hitler announcing the declaration of war against the United States to the Reichstag in December 1941. This act marked an escalation in the global conflict, establishing Germany as one of the main protagonists in the confrontation against the Allied powers. Divers recovered the figure of the Kriegsmarine heavy cruiser Graf Spee in Uruguay in 2006. The ship was sunk during the Battle of the River Plate on December 17, 1939. An American Marine carrying an M2 flamethrower lighting a pipe while Iwo Jima burns behind him. The scene portrays calm and concentration amidst the chaos, where destruction and sacrifice marked the fierce struggle. Commander of the 77th Dive Bomber Squadron, Major Clemens, Count of Schönborn-Wiesenthal, in a field in southern Russia in 1942. An image of the leader of one of the most feared squadrons in the Luftwaffe. A 20-year-old welder photographed by Bernard Hoffman in 1943. The image portrays the strength of women who, while many men were on the front lines, took on essential roles in the war. An Allied soldier takes the opportunity to bathe in the port city of Tobruk, Libya, in February 1942. A rare moment of relief amidst the chaos of the war in North Africa. Erwin Rommel sleeping on the way to occupied Warsaw in 1939. The future Desert Fox rests during the invasion of Poland, one of the first steps in his rise as one of the most feared generals of the Wehrmacht. Dresden after the Allied bombing in 1945. The city, devastated by explosions, reflects the magnitude of the destruction of war, where historical beauty was replaced by rubble and ashes, leaving a legacy of loss. When the Japanese surrendered aboard the USS Missouri in September 1945, the United States' air power was fully demonstrated. A fleet of more than 1,000 fighter planes flew over the mighty Mo in a low flyby. An injured Marine proudly displays a Japanese sword in Tarawa, November 1943. A symbol of conquest amidst the brutality of battle, where every captured object represented a victory. American paratroopers in Normandy in 1944. Soldiers from the airborne divisions faced one of the greatest challenges of the war, jumping behind enemy lines to ensure the success of the D-Day invasion. African American soldiers during the war, fighting bravely and facing not only the enemy, but also prejudice and segregation within the armed forces, proving their courage and ability in times of adversity. Joseph Goebbels awards Willy Hubner, 16 years old, the Iron Cross in Leuven, Silesia, in March 1945. Willy served as a messenger in the Führer Grenadier Division during the fighting to reclaim the region from the Soviet Red Army. A German soldier resting in an improvised chair on the African front in 1941. a moment of exhaustion and reflection as the harsh reality of the Desert War shaped the fate of those fighting in extreme conditions. A C-47 flying over the pyramids, delivering supplies to troops in Tobruk in 1942. Allied logistics were vital to sustain the Allied armies in their fight in North Africa, connecting key points of the war. Soviet troops advanced through the ruins of Stalingrad in 1942. The devastated city witnesses the relentless resistance of the Red Army, which, despite the destruction, continues its fierce fight against the Nazi advance. A German military cemetery in Tunisia, a quiet resting place for the soldiers of the Wehrmacht, where memories of the fierce campaign in North Africa are kept, reflecting the sacrifice in distant lands. Members of the Waffen-SS in Nuremberg in 1935, representing the growing militarization and power of the SS during the early years of the Nazi regime, in an event that further solidified loyalty to the Nazi ideology. Paratroopers from the Luftwaffe taking a break and resting in Heraklion after the Battle of Crete in 1941. A rare moment of rest for the elite troops after the fierce fight in one of the most significant German victories in the Mediterranean. A Panzer IV firing at a French anti-tank position during the Battle of France in May 1940. The scene captures the brutality of the conflict, where German forces used their armored superiority to crush French resistance. An American soldier visits the grave of an unknown U.S. soldier who had been buried by enemy forces before their retreat. An occasion of respect and reverence, where sacrifice and anonymity become part of the collective memory of war. A German MG-34 team advancing through a cornfield in the Soviet Union during the summer of 1942. The tense movement in enemy territory reflects the intensity of the fierce fighting on the Eastern Front. General of the Luftwaffe Keller arriving in Finland aboard a Heinkel aircraft, a significant moment of collaboration between Nazi Germany and Finland when both countries shared strategic interests in combating the Red Army. Marshal Zhukov inspects the troops during the 1945 Victory Parade, an image of pride and triumph, reflecting the Soviet strength and leadership that played a crucial role in the liberation of Europe. The view of the radio operator gunner from the cockpit of a Messerschmitt Bf-110 flying over France in November 1940. The tense perspective of a fighter pilot alert to the skies while flying over enemy territory during the early days of the war. Several newly manufactured F-4U Corsairs waiting for shipment to the Pacific Theater. The Allied Air Force prepared to dominate the skies, with these combat aircraft designed to be a key piece in the fight against the Japanese Empire. German infantry and panzer advancing into the USSR during Operation Barbarossa in July 1941. The offensive marked the beginning of one of the greatest conflicts in history, where the Wehrmacht sought to rapidly destroy Soviet defenses in a blitzkrieg attack. A Soviet self-propelled artillery unit advances down a Berlin city street with its canopies open in 1945. The image captures the strength of the Red Army, advancing through the devastated streets as the end of the war approached. Two British paratroopers in German custody in a captured British jeep in Arnhem, September 1944. The image portrays the chaos during Operation Market Garden, where many Allied soldiers were taken prisoner after the mission failed. An Italian soldier with his dog at an outpost in Ukraine in 1942. The humanity amidst the brutality of war is notable, where Axis soldiers sought companionship in the extreme conditions of the Eastern Front. This photo was taken hours before the death of General Joseph Beely. He was executed by the Nazis for his resistance activities later that same day. His courage and patriotism were marked until the last moment. An elderly man enlisted in the Volkssturm equipped with a Tankgewehr M1918 in Germany in 1945. An example of the final desperation of the Nazi regime, where even the elderly were called to defend the homeland with obsolete weapons. More than 5 billion bottles of Coca-Cola were distributed to soldiers during World War II, a gesture of support and comfort, bringing a piece of everyday life to those amidst the chaos of the conflict. American soldiers inspecting the Maginot Line in early 1945, a historic milestone symbolizing the fall of a fortress that the French believed to be impregnable, now observed by Allied forces in a transitioning Europe. The grave of an American pilot buried by Japanese Imperial forces in Alaska in 1943. The plaque reads, "Sleeping here, a brave aerial hero who lost youth and happiness for his country." Japanese Army. Slovak fighter ace Jan Rezniak showing his attack tactics to fellow Slovak ace Isidor Kovarik in April 1944. Both were highly decorated and considered the top aces of fascist Slovakia. Dutch resistance fighters with captured German weapons celebrate the liberation of Breda in October 1944. A moment of relief symbolizing the determination of a people who fought against Nazi oppression until the end. Adolf Hitler greeting German soldiers during the Victory Parade in Warsaw in October 1939. The image symbolizes the swift Polish conquest and the initial triumph of the Nazi regime, celebrating Germany's territorial expansion. A German, a Finnish, and a Russian smoking a cigarette in front of a military hospital in Kaunas, Karelia, in September 1941. Amid the chaos of war, a moment of shared humanity between enemies, marking the complexity of the Eastern Front. A World War II nurse in the 1940s holding an M3 grease gun, an image of courage where women also armed themselves to face the challenges of war, defying the traditional role. Soviet Red Army soldiers talking to children recently liberated from the Auschwitz concentration camp in 1945. A moment of relief and hope where the brutality of the Nazi regime finally gave way to freedom. The battleship Bismarck in 1940 before completing sea trials. An impressive demonstration of military power about to become one of the most feared vessels in the German Navy. Easy Company, 2nd Battalion of the 101st Airborne Division in Hitler's Eagle's Nest in 1945, a historic occasion for the Band of Brothers. Lieutenant Hugo Bragg with his decorations on his 98th birthday. With 81 aerial victories, he is the most successful surviving German pilot. His impressive career left a legacy of skill in aerial combat. A very tall German soldier is shown surrendering during the Battle of Normandy to a British soldier, symbolizing the end of Nazi resistance at one of the decisive points of World War II. A member of the Reichswehr Guard of Berlin performing a horizontal bar exercise wearing a field march uniform. An impressive feat showcasing the discipline and exceptional skill of German soldiers during the Weimar Republic period. Final resting place of an unknown English soldier near the Arnhem Bridge in 1945. A silent tribute to those who gave their lives, whose stories remain unknown, but whose sacrifice echoes in the collective memory. A member of the RAF holds a bulletproof window from a captured Messerschmitt Bf 109. A symbol of victory where the enemy's firepower is transformed into a reminder of Allied aviation success. Hans Philipp with a fox and his warplane in the background, the Messerschmitt Bf. A portrait of a Luftwaffe ace whose skill in aerial combat was as notable as his connection with nature. An American Marine cleaning his boot while resting on a 16-inch unexploded naval artillery shell in Saipan in June 1944. A moment of pause amidst the chaos, surrounded by the constant threat of death. A German soldier, a Soviet prisoner of war, and a Finnish soldier share an interest in photography in Karelia, Finland in 1941. Amidst the brutality of war, a rare moment of human connection. A Soviet soldier embraces an American soldier near the Elbe River in 1945. A symbolic gesture of fraternization between the Allies, marking the beginning of a new era of collaboration and reconstruction. American soldiers talking to a member of the Swiss Guard at the Vatican in 1944. The meeting was a rare exchange between Allied forces and one of the oldest institutions in the world, reflecting the tense and unpredictable atmosphere. Soviet, American, and British soldiers posing together for a photograph in Pariser Platz, Berlin in August 1945. an occasion of unity among the Allies, celebrating the victory over Nazism. A Soviet rubber ball taken as war loot by Finnish forces in Petrozavodsk, 1941. A small object which became a symbol of the harsh conditions and the complexity of the conflict between the countries.